Good evening. You are listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob, broadcasting to you as usual from the Pinellas Palace, just west of Orlando, Florida. I am in the Extreme Studios. I have on site, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, the young 20-something Professor Pixel joining RDV and myself for our coverage tonight, continuing a wonderful holiday trend, and that, of course, is Humphrey Bogart, one of the best actors of all time, ladies and gentlemen. I said it, and I stand by it because we're covering a wonderful movie tonight called Dead Reckoning with a femme fatale blonde bombshell on RDV. I know this was on the list. This is a really fun film. We've talked about Bogart in several films. Still have a lot more to go. This was not a first watch for me. However, I had not seen this in a long time. I wanted to know, before we go for Professor Pixel's first thoughts on this too and all that, was this a first watch for you, RDV?
This was a first watch for me. That was the first time seeing a Lizabeth Scott movie.
Beautiful woman.
Beautiful woman, but can't sing for a lick.
That being said, I agree.
I was expecting like, oh, we're gonna get this great, and I'm like, nobody knows. It's like Spaceballs all over again.
She's got a very distinctive voice.
Baritone voice.
Yeah,
yes.
Mezzo-soprano, I think.
Husky, as they say.
Yeah. So overall, I mean, initial impressions?
Initial impressions, well, we reviewed a couple movies now with Bogart, and we're starting to see a trend here. The femme fatale, basically him in over his head, trying to prove his innocence.
Mm-hmm.
We had this with Maltese Falcon. We had this with the Big Sleep. Now again with Dead Reckoning, he's getting into mixing up with women who he falls in love with, but he keeps his wits about him, and they always end up being like where the woman's basically the problem. So as they tell you, dames are trouble, Sammy.
Yeah, I know. It's I think it's a pretty interesting performance by him. I think it's definitely different than the other two movies.
But Morris Carnovsky, guy who plays Martinelli, Morris Carnovsky, another great actor here too. I mean, I'm not sure what else he's been in, but his acting was great. Lieutenant Kincaid, played by Charles Kane, and then you had everyone. Marvin Miller, who plays Krause. Krause, just from the minute you saw him, you knew this guy was a goon. I love it. I love it when you have a good goon in here. But yeah, this movie started off like, oh, I didn't know it was going to be a flashback, but apparently, yes, that's what it was. It's him talking to this priest that just came back from the war. This is right after World War II. So I love that they incorporated the World War II, acknowledged it in this movie, because the other ones didn't really acknowledge the war.
True, and it came out right after World War II here, so I think that's a really important point to it as well.
1946.
Pixel, you're the young 20-something on here. You don't often join us for these Sunday nights. It depends on what's going on. We have a lot of different scheduling going on. We do jump around a little bit, but as an 80s-based channel, it's interesting that you, being a second-generation viewpoint on here, I'm assuming this is a first watch for you. What's your initial take on this film?
This one is a first watch. I haven't seen the Maltese Falcon before, but I was unable to join that night. And I'm pretty sure I've watched The Big Sleep too, but I can't swear to it. But I definitely have seen Casablanca. I remember us reviewing that on here. And now Dead Reckoning. I did get a chance night before last to sit down and turn it on. I like this film very much. Humphrey Bogart, you're right. He is one of the best actors of all time. And when you go ahead and you see him first running into the church, and he has the darkness just over his form, like he's a living shadow as he's trying to go ahead and do that first bit to speak. It's great. And it takes us right into a flashback to give us the backstory that we need that'll propel us towards our end. How about you?
I think for me, I've got two words for you guys, and I'm going to love this word. Voiceover. I've often said that I've always loved it, and some people hate it. Some people think it's talking down to audiences. I remember this first came up in the early 80s with a movie called Blade Runner with Harrison Ford, because that was one movie that not only at the time was visually stunning, some people said, oh, it's an overrated piece of crap because it's boring and it's dull. And I think that when you would go watch it, you just kind of got sucked into the universe, right? And it's obviously was different than Star Wars or anything else that might be a universe on its own at the time. But for me, I don't have issues with voiceover. I like them. I think Humphrey taking a chance, or I don't know if taking a chance is the right word, doing it helps a lot with this movie, because kind of like the other two movies, The Big Sleep, and Maltese Falcon, you might go, there's a lot of shit going on. This one, I'm not gonna say has a lot going on, but it's more scene by scene rather than dump everything together, and it gives you, I think, this more intimate sense of he's by himself. And I think it has a different feel than the other two films, but I think it's an excellent film.
Yeah, and you say voiceover. Well, in comic books, we call that self-narration. Where he boxes. No, seriously, because that's where this come from. These movies like this.
I know.
One example would be the Batman. Year one, or basically, Batman Year One. He does self-narration through that, and it actually helps because I love this, and I love these movies because when you get a voiceover like this, you call this, it's not a self-narration, but it's him telling a story to the guy, and there isn't many movies that do that, at least modernized. There probably is quite a few back then. Whenever you get a detective, it's always he's doing the self-narration. It's like, oh, I don't trust this dame. You hear his inner thoughts, and I like that in a character because it fleshes the character out more versus having
access to him more.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, it's kind of like the character's like he's kind of there, but that's it. Like, you know what I mean? In a sense, where we have the goons. They're just there to be a typecast. Where the main character, you identify more with him.
Actually, I'm going to take that back because while it is a voiceover, yes, we have to remember this isn't just what he's thinking in his head. He is
he's telling the story.
Yeah, he's recounting the story. He's in the confessional trying to confess.
Yeah, the method of the storytelling is different in a sense that the voiceover is how it's achieved, technically speaking, but you're right. The guy's telling a story to somebody. We understand that too, but this is still unique though for the most part, right?
It's not like Dragnet with Dan Aykroyd, where it's in his head.
Right.
Yeah. I love this because at the very beginning, you see him like when Bogart goes, or we're led to believe it's Bogart walking into the church. This other priest just came back. He's another fellow paratrooper. They came back from the war, and he's like, hey, and you don't see Bogart's face; it's hidden, like in Dark Passage.
Yes,
I really loved. Like they just kept it purposely; you couldn't see his face. And you see he ducked in the church. His face is all scarred up a couple bit. You saw Bogart go in a little bit, scuffed up. He sits in the pew. But as soon as he walks over to the priest's comeback, it's just the whole story starts to unfold. But I love the little bit though, because it's raining outside. He runs inside, a cop car goes by, so you already know what kind of move this is going to be if he's already ducking into church. Because usually people would duck into church for sanctuary.
Exactly.
So I like this, and I was like, okay, we're going to go with this. But then we get a flashback. I was like, oh, cool. We're going to get a little flashback for the whole movie. Because sometimes you get a flashback and then they go jump back to the present and then they go back to the flashback. I like the fact that they did what they did with this movie. They kept it in the past. We get to see how the story untold, but you also get to hear Bogart, reminding us, hey, this is a flashback. This doesn't have it current because you hear him talking to the priest, throughout the movie. And it's done so well because Bogart has that unique voice.
Yes.
So anybody else been telling the story, I wouldn't have cared as much. But it just seems like Bogart, just like in the Big Sleep, he gets involved with women who are involved with guys who have casinos. Do you notice that?
And this is the theme that you would find in a lot of the pulp fiction at the time. Of course, we're talking about Raymond Chandler, Dashiell Hammond. Yeah. But I mean, if you extend it out to a little bit of classical European literature, whether it's Sherlock Holmes or other types of detectives. I mean, look, human nature is what it is, no matter what the year it is. So you're going to have your vices. And back then, I mean, people still gamble, people still do smoke and get involved in drugs. You can only show so much of it on TV. But what's interesting here is that they're dealing with adult themes. They're delivering it to you in a very G-rated manner because of how the times were back then in the 40s compared to now. And you have somebody like Humphrey that can just deliver it so perfectly because, again, you get hooked at the beginning. You have somebody here that Humphrey Bogart. You don't know his character, but he's distressed. To your point, the sanctuary thing goes, hey, this shit's for real. This is tough. You feel the tension going, hey, I only have a little bit of time. I'm a fellow paratrooper. This is where I think Humphrey Bogart excels because a lot of people just think of him as just standing there smoking a cigarette and looking cool. Well, yeah, but the talking part of it, he has a different voice for each of these different scenes.
Do you also notice this is the first movie that's not Warner Brothers Productions? This is Columbia.
Yeah, you would get loaned out at a time, from studios.
And
That's what happened here.
so he goes to Columbia for this movie, but they also apparently didn't want to get Liz. Originally, Lizabeth Scott was the last choice. They wanted Rita Hayworth,
Yes.
who was already tied up in a movie, and they didn't want to make the movie, so basically they and it was going to go at the Paramount, but then Columbia decided at the last minute we'll do the movie. So I thought it was interesting because we were talking about movies that were done through Warner Brothers Productions.
Yes.
So I was like, this is Columbia? I was a lot surprised. I'm like, I guess he decided to go to a different company because remember they were competitors. So it's like you had MGM, you had Warner Brothers, and you had Columbia. They weren't all owned by one company like Sony,
Right.
Yeah, or Fox or Disney as they are now. So yeah, this is one of my, I'd say is the ones we've watched so far. I would say at the top right now is The Big Sleep. Then you have Dead Reckoning, and then we go to The Maltese Falcon, and then Casablanca for me. But I'm in somewhere Dark Passage is in the middle there somewhere.
There's High Sierra. There's Treasure of Sierra Madre.
I know there's so many, but I definitely got to rank these at the end of this when Pixel gets back from his vacation.
Yeah, I think the thing interesting about this movie too, and Pixel, this is a typical kind of setup where, I mentioned before on the Extreme Movie Show when we talk about themes and all that. One thing that Roger Ebert, who was very famous for doing and reviewing stuff on the show at the movies, he used the term MacGuffin. I don't know where it came from, but it's what's moving the action along. We don't care what it is. Mission Impossible 3, I remember for some reason this term being used a lot more. It's the rabbit's foot, right? And so you get this kind of thing that you're like, oh man, Mission Impossible 3, the way they wrote this is kind of cool, and they really shoot the dude's wife and blah blah blah. And you're like, okay, I'm intrigued. Well, this movie's 50 plus years earlier than that, 60, 70. So it's like we see it here because how we have to get the story out because something's happening in now. And what it is he and his partner are coming back from Europe. They don't know exactly why they're being summoned to DC, but it turns out they find out along the way that, hey, because of what they did, there's some heroic stuff. They're going to be nominated, but what he doesn't know is the guy that he's buddies with and all that. It's interesting because there's stages of revealing here. When the guys want to take some pictures of him as they go in, he obviously being visibly distressed. And he took his shirt off too, Maranya. I don't know if you noticed that, because that was pretty rare for that time to show chest, I think, in a movie, especially for a guy.
Wash himself down a little bit,
Yeah. The dude hops off the train and joins another one and bids, adieu to the guy with salute.
Yeah.
Yeah, then he just kind of starts basically looking for him, and he uncovers some levels of things going into it with women and with gambling and all sorts of stuff. And that's the whole fun of it, is watching him on his own go deeper and deeper and all that. So what did you guys think of that?
Yeah, no, I loved the reveals. That first one that you said with his partner, basically the nomination, pulling it away. But following that, okay, well, he didn't do it, but she did it. Oh my gosh, can't believe she did that. But it's in self-defense. They still are feeling something for each other. Love will prevail. Oh, she's crazy. Well, not crazy, but she's
crazy. Now, the interesting thing here is when we're watching it, unlike, say, Maltese Falcon, where a lot of stuff's going on, you got to decide who you want to trust, right? Here, it's one level at a time for the most part. First of all, it's his partner, and you're like, wait a minute, he doesn't know his partner. Then he finds out his partner only ran into the military because he must have been avoiding something. And then he looks it up in the newspaper. He starts doing some detective work on his own. You're like, damn it, this is good. And then he sees what's going on, and then he sees the guy, and he goes, well, maybe I'll do that. And then he goes to the hotel where, wait a minute, a room's already been booked for him. So he's got a couple days for the guy to meet him, and then he realizes, wait a minute, I can go down there. So this is the fun part where you're diving into the unknown and not knowing where it's going to take you and meeting people along the way.
But the key thing, though, is, he gets that little identification tag, John Joseph Preston Yale 40.
Yes.
Which basically leads the whole entire thing off.
Yes.
Because he finally gets the guy's name, because, and then he said he goes detective work. He finally remembers the guy's service record. He goes and looks at the newspapers because it'll be 2 years prior to this. And he finds out the whole thing that he's involved with the shooting of this woman's wife. So he goes to investigate her. He doesn't trust her in the beginning. Starts to fall in love with her, and she tries to play him a little bit as a patsy. He's got this guy Martinez over. Basically wants to
Martinelli.
frame
Old
him.
school Italian.
Yeah. Martinelli wants to frame him for murder because the one bartender was going to give him a note from Johnny, and it's coded. Apparently, we find out later.
Which I love that because they'd want to beat the crap out because this movie's a little violent without guns.
Yeah. Speaking of guns, he does use a gun in here too, but I don't think he fires a single shot though. But I know, but we get to use them. He gets to use them phosphorus grenades, which is really cool.
Right.
Right. But yeah, normally we've been seeing him where at least 2 movies now where he's always like he says his line. I'm always collecting guns. He's grabbing guns, people disarming them without even having to fire. It's pretty cool. But yeah, he goes and he wants to get this letter from this guy, and this bartender's gonna give him, but he got the goon watching them, and they end up killing the bartender and try to pin the murder on him. He wakes up in his hotel room, and there's on the other bed, there's the bartender. Dead.
They had slipped him the Mickey again. I love this. I love this.
The first time, because they basically went into the office because he didn't like the fact that they were basically letting Chandler, Lizabeth Scott, win and everything. The dice were loaded. And he discovered he kept the dice, after grabbing the guys. He's like, no, I'm kind of fond of those winning dice. I'm going to keep them. Goes in there and he basically gets the guy, the bartender that was going to basically give him the letter. Shows up. He's like, here's a drink. And he's thinking like, oh, it's probably lace or something. He's like, but if I don't drink it, the guy will know that I'm onto them. And so he takes it, even though he's gonna get knocked out. He wakes up and the guy's dead. The bartender's dead. Puts him in quickly puts him into the laundry hamper basket that's outside the room, and then quickly puts his hand in there and closes it. Goes back to his room. Quickly gets undressed. As the door knocks, it's the lieutenant basically had seen at the morgue, and he's like, oh, I just woke up. What do you want? It's like they're just questioning him. And it's just like the way he outsmarts everybody, and that's what a lot of these Bogart movies. He is top alpha dog. Mentally, mentally, and the way he handles stuff. He's not a big physical, intimidating guy, but he uses his wits.
Yes,
and it just makes everybody look like stooges. I love it. And then as he always plays the calm demeanor. And he watches everyone sweat. I love it. It's like Elizabeth Scott, is a beautiful woman, but she's a snake. Can't trust her. Yeah. And just like some would probably argue today, like, oh yeah, these movies are anti-women. No, anti-killers.
Well, the way some of these scripts are written back in the day, there's been what we would call, I guess,
details.
Yeah, and that was actually a thing in the book. So that's one thing in the books, but in the movie, or movies generally speaking, you definitely had some people looking at this for lack of a better term, a feminist lens about saying, well, these are misogynistic. They're very pro-alpha male. So you're seeing a lot of older stuff looked at in different lights. That's all I'll say about that. These women aren't weak. They're not stay-at-home cooks or any of that stuff the feminists say, or, is a weak thing to do or any of that kind of stuff. So that's not really what this is about, although that seems to be apparent in some older movies where we have a lot of tough guys, right? Now, what I was going to say to Pixel and ask him about, because, as the young 20-something, we're working our way through season 1 of Forever Night, a show which is pretty interesting. It's pretty progressive in the way they choose to treat the studly male masculine vampire we've come to know over a generation or so. And instead, this guy's got a softer side to him. He understands people, and he basically doesn't want to drink blood. He wants to repay society for his sins, as the opening would tell you. And Pixel, you and I covered every episode so far of Twin Peaks, including the movies, all 3 seasons, the movie, Fire Walk with Me. I think the first season, I still would argue with anybody, still probably one of the best TV shows ever written, because when you watch the first episode and at the end and the second episode, that 6-8 episodes, whatever, for season 1, it floored me how you, as a 20-something guy, was like, you have absolutely no idea where this is going. I don't know of many other shows or movies that are like that, because I definitely think you get that vibe here in Dead Reckoning. So I didn't know if that reminded you of Twin Peaks or if you had some thoughts about that.
Well, I mean, there's certainly noir inspirations for David Lynch, and I could probably,
to be
if I had
fair,
time to go into that, I could probably point to this. But when it comes to this movie in particular, I do want to touch upon a section, right? It's close to the end, past the church. Is that okay? I don't want to mess up your flow. Okay. Well, once Murdock has already fallen for Coral and saying, "Hey, we're going to go away," and he's going to go ahead and get the gun that has evidence that it's him when it's not. He goes ahead and he pulls out the gun, and he's being that threatening type, like you mentioned earlier, which felt off for Humphrey Bogart for me. Now that he's mentioning that, yes, because the way that in that scene that he's going ahead and he's being like, "Okay, get down," and he's kicking that guy. It's just something about his manner was manic to me.
Okay.
Well,
it was something that was clearly like distracting me in the screen. It's a good scene. I'm not saying it's a bad one, but this is where the revelations are coming out that maybe he shouldn't trust Coral. Maybe Coral is the problem. Coral's the club owner's wife. Oh, he killed Chandler. And everything is not stacking up as it's been revealed. It's the one last card on the house cards that's tumbling down.
Yeah, so that scene with him, he's got the 2 grenades and he's got the gun.
Yes,
he's coming up manic. They are panicking because they have a problem. Remember, these are guilty people.
I'm talking about him, not the people inside. I'm talking about.
No, so I'm talking about Humphrey Bogart. It was in character for him because he was outwitting them. He was playing an act, playing a part. At this point, they have no idea. This guy just blew in a town. They don't have know anything about him at all. Even the cop doesn't know the fact that he's even an army, in the army, and stuff. So it's like I said, they were desperate. They tried to out of frame him. This guy comes in and then he outsmarts them by putting the body of the bartender with the help of Coral into the other guy's lake house, suite over. And they call the cops and they pin the murder on him. But it's like at this point, like I said, Pixel. For me, it was believable. But if you're saying like him waving around,
it's not a part of his usual performance. So
he's done that before. The Maltese Falcon. He's done that before. He's put on acts for people. He's also in the Big Sleep.
This felt almost like Let's Get Nuts territory.
Well, he wasn't no Michael Keaton Batman, Tim Burton. It wasn't like that, but it fits his persona in his movies he's done before.
Yeah, I think the thing with Humphrey Bogart is if you know who he is and you watch him, you go, he to me, he's one of the early templates along with a couple other actors that you go, okay, I'm not watching an actor, I'm watching somebody just be himself, and that's what I want to see. And so he does have this bit of manic side. What I thought, and this is where I don't know if the confusion comes in, is when we talked about the beginning scene being real desperate too, and the setup for it there, RDV. What was very noticeable to me was, the 2 other detective movies, they're almost flip sides of a similar coin. He's got an intense personality. This one, I thought he was showing a softer side. So to me, when he turned it up at the end, it had some value in it. That's how I chose to see it. So I don't know if Pixel's just conflating that with the other 2, and that that's how you see it. So Pixel, I don't know, but I have seen it before too. So I would lean towards RDV as far as I know that's capable of. I didn't think it was a convenient thing or just doing it for that sake.
Especially the Maltese Falcon. I recently just watched that. On how long
it wasn't a critique. It was just something that I noticed that
it didn't resonate well with you. That it's okay.
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
It was bad.
No. I'm just pointing it out that maybe you don't remember from Maltese Falcon where he did that with the guy at the Sydney Green Street in the hotel. We put on an act.
Almost 4 years. So
yeah. Also in the Big Sleep, where he was outsmarting the people inside the cottage stuff, and just he's been known for his characters. The part of his his intellectual, wit, where he basically puts on an act and tries to be something that he's not. Like we just with the Maltese Falcon, he did that multiple times, and try to like, oh yeah, I'm on your side. No, I'm on your side. He just basically he fed people bullshit lies, and they were dumb enough to believe it. So
that's still what you just described is still different from him going into the room with the gun and keeping him down, kicking the guy.
He's done that before in other movies. I'm just trying to point you out. It's nothing new for him, unless you said
it's been a while. Like I said, so
I would recommend go watching The Big Sleep and then watching The Maltese Falcon again. Great movies.
Sure.
But yeah, he basically he's been assertive with a gun. He's not like it's not like Jimmy Stewart coming with a gun. Hey, get down, guys! I got a gun. It's not crazy like that. But it was, and for those who if you've seen more of his movies recently, like I said, you'll see it, you recognize the pattern he does this, and it's one of the things I like about him because like he's cool, calm, and collected, and he thinks, and even here with the girl, he tells her like, Mike, calm down, Mike. When they get pulled over by the cop, calm down, and it's like because she's freaking out because she doesn't have her driver's license. She blew the stoplight, and the cop pulls over, and like especially after he tells her like they hit because recently she blew the stoplight because he told her like, yeah, the body's inside the trunk of your car, so we better get there, And that's what causes her to speed up because she panics, and then the cop pulls over, and he gives the cop speech. Well, he's like, well, we're going away to see the mayor. He's like, oh, now you're friends with the mayor. He's like, well, yeah. The reason she panicked is my fault because I told her if we get to the courthouse by 4, he'll marry us. So I love how he improvises because that was not planned.
One of the things that I noticed in this film, though, we mentioned at the beginning, was the whole. Some people might call it an anti-woman kind of slant to some of these things, and I'm going to disagree with that. I think the interesting thing here is the way some people would classify lying to somebody is you have lying by admission. You don't tell somebody something because you omit to tell them something that you think they may be wanting an answer to. You're lying. So some people think that's disingenuous. So hold on a second. The other part too is there's the lying by just telling the truth with only a kernel of it in there without putting some other stuff in there. It's like another advanced variation to it. And so the whole thing that these movies that there is a pattern of that's definitely been a thing, and it's still a thing that happens today, is that okay, he's fallen for her, he understands why this has all happened, he finds himself where he's in it, he wants to believe her and this and that, but at the end, it's kind of just like, yeah, I killed the one dude, but this is why. So I'm being honest with you. So somehow that's okay. Yeah. And so his trust level is already kind of low to begin with. So at the end, you're like, it's always those bitter endings. That's something we'll probably talk about if and when we ever review Miami Vice, because you would see this a lot more in television and other shows coming up later, that these patterns always replay themselves. You might love a woman, but can you trust a woman? And here's why. It's not that a woman's bad. It's in her nature to be verbal about things. And so I thought this movie at least got that part about the human nature right, where he wanted to believe, but in the end, really, could he?
Well, I'll piggyback after that too, because even in The Big Sleep, Lauren Bacall played the same similar character. She lied and stuff like this. She wasn't necessarily a bad character. Now, I think it was Mary Astor. That was in the last one we did with Maltese Falcon. She was downright ruthless. She was selfish, and he called her out on it too. He basically conned her and everything. This character, like I said, is just like Lauren Bacall's character. Is like but a little bit more. She can't trust anybody. She's kind of like him in a sense. She even takes out Martine, but and as they're driving, driving away, he says yeah, I'm not no fool. I know that you're gonna try to bump me off. That bull was meant for me. It's like, and she's like, where are we going? He's like, we're going to the police station. He's like, she's like, did you get the gun? He's like, yeah, I got the gun. It's like in my pocket. And she calls the gun. She's like, you're not, basically threatening him. And he's like, go ahead. As he speeds up the car, you shoot me, we're gonna be splattered across the pavement, and so I gotta say, with the end like this, I'm like, oh, it's like the Invisible Man. You're waking up, and like you're in a hospital bed. I'd like to see my love one last time. It's like, go see him. It's like, I thought that's cool too, because when he gets knocked out, he's drugged. He's in the first place. He's in the Martinelli's office, and you see the lights and stuff. You see he's pretending because he feels
Just
like
having a moment.
having a moment. Basically, he's on a conscious stuff. I love how he did this. Like he feels like he's parachuting because he's a paratrooper. That's what he was in the war.
Right.
You figure following stuff, and they show a little parachute going down and all that stuff. I kind of love how they kind of like dramatize that, or what we call it, dramatize, or what we're called. But that was cool. And then when he wakes up, he sees the lights, the circle lights. But it's actually the guy holding the lamp and stuff. Same thing when she wakes up in the hospital, and she look up and he sees people standing around her and stuff. I love those shots, like when they do stuff like that. And at first, we're like, "Is this him?" No, it's her. Like, because as far as we know, it's like they crashed. We saw it. They basically crashed into a tree, and we don't know if he made it or not.
Yeah.
Because that would have been a bad movie at the ending, or actually, would it be a bad ending if he died? And then she
yes, because you want to root for him, but she has to die because she's not good.
No.
But what if they both died?
She's wicked, but Humphrey is there for her.
Is she wicked, or is she just a victim of her own?
Yes, and yes.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think she's truly evil, but I mean, I think that she's in over her head.
Oh, she's diabolical. It was all her plans. I've come too far now. She was going to shoot it. What are you talking about? She's evil. He's the bad guy.
Hey, take the patriarchy a little bit down a little bit.
I'm saying she's bad because she's a woman. She's a woman who has.
But I'll just say this to that element when people say like, "Oh, they paint Bogart's always women are villains." The guys are villains too, and the guy, so it's basically Dave's their trouble, Sammy. That's what it is. That's what these movies are, and
guys are consistent with their whatever character they are, which that's called integrity.
They're cookie cutter
women
stories.
In here, the way they're put them, are not that way. That's just the basic nature of men and women. You trust a guy not because he's a good human being or he goes to church on Sundays or any of those kind of things. It's the fact that you know what you're getting. You'll deal with an asshole because he's an asshole, whereas the snake you can't trust because he says one thing to you and he says something else to other people. So you don't want to deal with that. And with women, they use their verbal abilities to take a situation to kind of put it in their favor. And I think what you just said actually reminded me of an earlier comment that somebody made in the movie where they basically said, she's number one on everybody's list. Not that she's banging everybody and using that skill to get what she wants, but she is number one in a lot of people's minds. So she's going, okay, this is the social situation I find myself in. How do I maximize it to my advantage? It's not that she's looking at him like he's lovey-dovey. He's a means to an end. Yes, she's evil. Here's
the thing back then, too. Women were looked on upon as being angels back then.
Exactly.
They're going to put on pedestals.
Yes.
So men were known for being rough, vile. So if she said that if he hit her for any reason, she'd say, well, I feared for my life. He hit me, she has the bruise and all that stuff. She could easily manipulate. And still to this day, it works for certain people. But eventually the truth does come out. But like I said,
eventually you get you put a gun in somebody's side and that person drives you into a tree.
You're just so triggered, sir. But literally though, like I said, these movies they're not the most complex stories, but it's the
I disagree.
No, hold on, let me finish. Let me finish there, young buck. No. These aren't the most complex stories, but it's the acting, the way, the mannerisms. How Bogart, with Lizabeth Scott, their mannerisms, the way they deliver the lines, that's what makes it unique. You put anybody else in these roles, it's not the same movie.
Yeah,
I mean, tough. Yes, but I'm going to go ahead and say that a part of the fun is the mystery. The mystery behind it, the little secret, the twists, the turns that come in. The mystery, even if you have a femme fatale in multiple stories,
is there really a mystery if every movie he does is the same and it's always the woman and it's her lover that are the murderers and he's the guy who's caught in the middle? It's like, yeah. But anyway, I know what you're saying though. If it's your first Bogart movie, it's a mystery until you start noticing the pattern. Like we watched, we've reviewed 3 of them.
Either way, but
yeah. Okay. Like Casablanca, same thing. It's like the mystery. It's like
Casablanca is less that though. Casablanca is No, it's not a mystery at all. He's
Well,
trying. A woman is back in his life. It's one of the greatest love stories.
It's not a love story.
It's not a love story.
How's it a love story?
No,
it's a love story.
No,
why? They're not lovers anymore. It's bitter more than anything.
But it's bittersweet because
correct.
It's
That's not
love
love
that they had. What are you talking about?
So
that's why he does it.
Casablanca, she sold him a line and used him, and he is basically she walks into his he says all the gin joints. She walks into mine, because he hates her. But he's still infatuated with her because he remembers that love they had a couple summer goes or whatever. So you could say it's more like a toxic relationship. Because she
Why
likes
don't
him,
you use what the kids are saying nowadays? Situationship. There you go.
What?
That's what the kids say now. I don't know.
Well, the fact that your generation and younger, Pixel, cannot form mutually beneficial, positive relationships with members of the opposite sex because they can't even define sex, that doesn't change the fact that stuff still exists, and the difficulties they have aren't going to be entertaining in any future movie about it. The bittersweet nature of Casablanca is, I think, really told in a very adult way, and the fact that Bogart's able to convey this everyman sense of pain and cynicism in his head while still trying to do the right thing, which is what I would argue he does in Casablanca, in this movie and the other ones. No matter if he's an asshole or a little bit violent, or in this case here, kind of nice, he's got a moral code, you know what it is, and he just seems like a man because he's consistent with that. And he's not a right fighter. He's not preaching to everybody about how they should live their life. He's live and let live. Great actor for that. That to me, in many ways, is almost like a role model. I think that's why his character is really recognizable, even across several generations now. He's what we would aspire to achieve, to be that kind of a human being as a guy. Am I wrong about that?
Bogart used to be live and let live. Now he's live and let die.
Well,
but overall, this movie, though, like I said, I know her name's Coral. Did you actually know her actual real name was Carl? It's just you could pronounce the name. Sorry.
Just Coral. She smelled like jasmine, which they introduced that early on. If you noticed. And then they referenced it later. Smelled like jasmine. Yeah.
So when he's in the office, it smells like jasmine all the time, and he keeps noticing things. So he knew that she was like basically leading him on. Yeah. And he basically had to fight his urges, to ignore that, because he's a rational guy. He has that rational thinking. Basically, he's like, yeah, I'm in over my head, and I want to know what happened to my best friend. He's like, he says at the end, he's like, yeah, I did love you. It is true, but I love Johnny more.
One thing we didn't say, and I suppose it's a different way you could go back if you were to rewatch this movie, or if you've never watched it, watch it with this idea in mind, is that no matter the fact that his buddy who went through heroic stuff with him and they were going to get this award, the fact that he lied to him about who he was and what happened before, no matter what the trouble was, didn't necessarily bother him in the least. He wanted to understand what happened and what went on. He wasn't butthurt about it. He was confused, but he's like, oh, it must have been bad. So he knows with the relationship he had with his buddy in the war that was real. What happened before that? So you can have a relationship with somebody that can be really good, but the relationship with everybody else is negative or positive or whatever. In this particular case here, he was involved in some bad shit, but there was never a thought in his mind about being disloyal or saying, well, hey, fuck you, you're leaving me, I'm fuck you too. He's like, no, for you to have done that, it must have been something bad. What is it? And that's when he gets caught with it. At no point does he say, hey, screw this, I'm gonna get the hell with all you guys, I'm out of this situation. Doesn't even cross his mind.
So I have to apologize because I misspoke earlier about talking about the song about how Lizabeth Scott sang in the movie. That wasn't her. She lip synced. It was actually Trudy Stevens who sang it. It was a song called Either It's Love or It Isn't by Alan Roberts and Doris Fisher.
Right.
Yeah, IMDb gives you guys. If you guys check out IMDb, there's a lot of cool trivia stuff on there too. Right. One of the good things of IMDb. There isn't many, but yeah. So basically, like I said, this movie, I have this saying, Pixel, is if you haven't been watching reviews, I'm like, Lizabeth Scott, this could have easily been Lauren Bacall. It would have been a much better movie. Lauren Bacall, just their chemistry they have with each other. It's just it's real because they actually are married. They're in love. But yeah, so I said this movie is pretty much how described in this one shot here. When he meets her, they're sitting at the diner, and she's giving him his story, and he's just like, "Yeah, sure, like I believe you." that's how Bogart kind of is throughout just some of these movies. He kind of seems like he's uninterested, but then he has this quick smile and like, yeah, I believe you. And especially when she puts on the waterworks, because she's tell me about, have you seen Johnny? He's like, yeah, I saw him a couple hours ago. He's like, how is he? He's burnt to a crisp. And she starts crying, and then like I said, I love these old school movies like this. The car scene, obviously she's driving. I'm like, women drivers back then, I guess it's 1946. The women were driving. I'm not saying that they weren't. I'm just saying it's like normally
it was early on.
Normally, whenever you see people driving back in the day, it was usually the husband that drove.
Mm-hmm.
The wife, was either tending the kid in the back seat.
Yeah, but her husband isn't there.
No, I know. So she's
in that.
So yeah. So it was interesting that he wasn't driving, that she was driving. I would have figured that maybe he doesn't trust her, but then he's like, well, this way he can keep an eye on her. She's hands on steering wheel. But like I said, it was interesting to see her. But anyway, I love. You can tell when they have the not green screens, but they have the moving picture screen behind them, because you tell they're not really driving.
Yeah, the background projection.
Yeah, I love that when they do stuff like that too. That's why I'm kind of like when I popped for the old Conan O'Brien TV series show in the 90s. He had the desk, he pulled the steering wheel, and also they're driving from those moving picture scenes. I love that when they put those in the movies, because now everything is green screen, or they have a car being pulled on a trailer to make it look real.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I said this, the little things in these movies, the drinks, the way their posture. Bogart was known for that kind of posture, like that.
Yeah. Two thoughts here as we start to get ready to wrap it up here.
Yeah.
I popped personally for when we got a little chance to see suburbia there with the sidewalks and going in the house and looking at the fixtures and the doors and stuff. As I get older and I go through all these different phases of the way houses look, and older ones too, looking at that stuff, I'm like, oh wow, that's cool to see that. And I've talked about that with San Francisco, particularly from the 40s with Bogart and other movies, all the way to the 70s with Dirty Harry and modern times. So that's interesting. But the one thing I did want to bring up, because here on the Extreme Movie Show, when we talk about movies, is we look for themes, we look for things we like, don't like, if they're effective or not. One thing, RDV, you and I talked about early on, and then Pixel, when you started coming on board, you've done some other stuff with us, and we still have the same approach. Yeah. But we start off as an action-based 80s channel, because I was a teenager then. I mentioned a lot about the templates that you'd have in 80s movies. And I think that, you don't watch Arnold for the acting, you watch him because you like Arnold, right?
His charisma.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what Bogart is charisma.
Yeah, I just think, though, that when you see a movie like this, you just go, God, you can see why people in the 70s and 80s and 90s would start to replicate some of these older things. I mean, it was pretty interesting. But one thing that really, I'm going back to thinking about off the top of my head here. Huge Sylvester Stallone fan. You and I have just finished season 2 of Tulsa King reviewing it. One of the first movies we did early on was we did First Blood, Rambo, right?
Yeah.
And we talked about how back then there was not very many movies that talked about Vietnam War in the late 60s, early 70s, the transition of people PTSD, going from war and PTSD into it. We see that here, how that was a subject people didn't really want to tackle even in the 80s. You could argue this movie's got a little bit of it because, hey, why do people join the military back then when you could forge your records or get through it? Why? Because you did something bad. So what are the type of people serving? Well, you still have that connection, right? But how do these guys deal with the PTSD in war? They're loyal to each other, but maybe that's a fault of Bogart here, that he gets involved in something he shouldn't have. I don't know. But there's an element of, I think, post-war here too, that the movies are now starting to pick up on.
They keep reminding you that this post-war, that he's actually served the military. They keep reminding you, especially when he goes to get a gun in the sky. But first he was hired. Basically, he was going to hire the guy to basically to crack the safe, because he needs to get that letter out of Martinelli's vault. You know, and it's his vault safe. But the guy, as soon as he tells Martinelli, he's like, "Oh, I can't do it." So he's like, "Yeah, and she's like, "Well, how don't you show him?" And it's like, it was her idea that so Bogart could do it, get the letter out of there, because she want the letter too, I guess. She probably figured it was confession, and it probably implicates her too. But the other thing too is like that guy they're gonna hire that's the safecracker. I love it because he's like, yeah, my son came home and he's like, they see all the grenades and you see the guns and bayonets. And he's like, it's just like a lot of people did sneak home stuff like that from Japan.
Absolutely.
And it's like, so we see this again is Death Wish.
With Charles Bronson, you're 100%
yeah,
right.
Yeah, you see the guy has a Browning machine gun. 50 cal. So I like when you see stuff like this. World War II. I love World War II movies, or movies that's basically movies that remind you that they take place World War II. Not because there's a lot of movies that were done during World War II that weren't centered around the war, and they didn't really mention it.
Right.
I guess it was to put people at ease because their loved ones are overseas.
Well, because also, while wars have always gone on, you're living in a time where you actually have a middle class where people could take the time out of their day rather than surviving to contemplate, the nature of what it means to be at war and all that philosophical crap. So that's kind of a tough, heavy thing to handle because people went to movies for escape, not to get morally lectured.
Exactly. Yeah. Did you count how many coins he was using to make a phone call?
No.
It was like a quarter, I think, or quarter a nickel, or as he put in.
Buffalo nickel, not a buffalo, but probably a nickel.
Oh yeah, the Buffaloes don't have nickels back then,
Pixel, final thoughts, sir.
Oh, my final thoughts are as followed. This is a very solid, just a solid noir film, solid Humphrey Bogart film. Like I said, even though it's been a while since we've done the old watcheroo here, I really did like it.
Nice. RDV, any other final thoughts? I think it was a great film. I enjoyed it. Go see it. I think if you're a Bogart fan, obviously see it.
It's you yourself to watch pretty much every Bogart film that he's done. And that's our goal on the Extreme Movie Show. We're going to review them all.
Absolutely. We'll get to all of them.
And then we'll get to the rest of Charlton Heston's,
Yeah.
Like I said, I do appreciate that everybody shows up. Desert Rose, it's always great to see you. Marania, anybody else who's watching on the replay, or even people who are watching right now or aren't even saying anything, because it shows we have like 8 or 6 people keep bouncing back and forth.
Wasn't this the runaway winner on our poll here, going up against Spellbound and Secret of the Incas? I think that got 1 vote.
It's crazy when I look at the numbers that some of these movies do. Like Maltese Falcon, yeah, it's okay, but like The Big Sleep just like went crazy in views.
Yes,
I wonder. Like I said, I wonder if The Big Sleep is a contender for Casablanca.
I don't know.
I mean, I'd be curious to see, put a poll up and that, and like, what do you like more? Casablanca probably will win, but I mean,
it was the fan favorite. That's why we did it. So I thought it's a great film. I'm glad we've had a few winners here in a row. We'll have the new poll up. Was it Tuesday night? Correct?
Yeah, we'll be it. Desert Rose says I watched on Thanksgiving, enjoyed it. It was like my second Bogart film ever. Wait, your second? So it's your only second movie you watched with Bogart. What was your first one you watched?
Yeah.
But I would recommend watching like Maltese Falcon, The Big Sleep, and then maybe coming because I watched Casablanca. That was my first movie with him.
I would say Casablanca and Treasure Sierra Madre after you've watched a few more, only because those are considered his better films, and once you watch a few more of them and you've got the feel for what he is, I think you appreciate it there more. Because if you're not a fan and you're just starting to watch it, you may not pick out a lot of the differences.
So she watched Maltese Falcon first.
The first Bogart film I ever got to watch was Dark Passage. Freaking phenomenal! I love that movie.
Dark Passage is cool. That is
cool. So good.
If you're looking for a good Bogart film to watch during Christmas, We Are No Angels.
Yes,
we reviewed it on his channel. So go watch.
Very different. Very different.
No, but not really. It's still a Bogart being Bogart. It's not like who murdered who, whatever. No, but it's more like it's a deal with like It's not Three Stooges. Like
it's edging on Three Stooges.
No, it's not. It's
without the punching each other and gags.
It's a light Christmas comedy for the time. Yeah, that's all it is.
Very good. I liked it a lot, but it's very different.
Getting back to my shameless plug, go watch the We Are No Angels. You can go watch that, and then come back here and check it on the playlist. We got a bunch of the playlist, so I mean, I would like you to see more of his movies before you watch our playlists, so you don't spoil it for yourself. One with Lauren Bacall, The Big Sleep. She's also in Key Largo. That's another good one with her too as well. So I almost said Key Fargo. Been watching Fargo lately. But no, I'm trying to think what else he did with her. He did quite a few. And excuse me, sir.
Have not. Is that the other one?
I don't do this. You know, don't worry about it. But anyway,
5 minutes.
Yeah, and then the other girls show up like 10 minutes late, so I'm not worried about it. Anyway, please leave a comment down below. Let us know what you thought of this movie. Not a lot of people leave comments. I guess people are just shy. But yeah, we'll do some more Bogart movies. But who knows? Maybe this Tuesday poll will be a Bogart list.
Yeah, check out the new poll. We'll have up there
on Forever Night.
Yes. Also, since Pixel is actually being more active on the channel, you're gonna see more Forever Night episodes being dropped on Thursdays. So
yes.
But yeah, thanks for being here, man. And it's great. It's great to see you on the channel. You know, it's
we never see each other, Bankman.
Not on this channel.
Maybe in another life.
I mean, it's by choice for me personally, but but like I said, it's great to talk about these, and also it's great to see like as Martin pointed out, 3 different generations talking about Bogart and our love for his movies. Bogart transcends time. His movies, they are timeless, and if you've never watched them, you need to go watch them.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
Educate yourself.
Good night now.
Yes. Later.
Extra.